If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Before we get started talking about Pirates baseball here, just wanted to take a minute to send thoughts and prayers out to the young man who was injured at the Pirates game last night. All we know right now, it's putting out there in critical condition. People have probably seen the videos or at least heard the stories about it, but didn't want to really get into talking about Pirates baseball without doing that. Scott, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. And like you said, sending positive thoughts, positive vibes to that fan, and hoping for the best possible outcome.
Yeah, definitely a scary situation. In what could have been, or may have been, a nice comeback win for the Pirates, ends up being a sombering, clubhouse. They basically said didn't have any interviews with any of the players, anything like that. But baseball was played again today. Not the outcome, the Pirates were hoping and looking for. We knew that the West Coast trip was going to be a little bit tough for them. They actually got some wins out there against the Angels. The Dodgers wasn't able to make it happen. The Cubs, it looked like we were at least going, kind of toe to toe with them. But in the end, the NL Central leader at this point in time prevails, and I feel like Pirates fans and their feelings are at a very sombering and an all-time low at this point in time.
Well, that goes to show how spoiled we are with Skenes. That once we were able to salvage that game yesterday on Wednesday, we were thinking, oh, well, we're going to win the series because Skenes is pitching Thursday afternoon, and that's as good as a win right there. And we saw today that against even the best lineups, Skenes can be mortal and isn't always the most dominant pitcher that we've ever seen. But at least that's a nice feeling to have for an ace, is to be like, well, you have a stopper, and we can almost count that as a win. And I think that that's a definition of an ace that we haven't seen in this organization before.
No, if you would have told me before this series started that the one game we would win would be the Carmen Mlodzinski start, and the two games that we would lose would be Andrew Heaney and Paul Skenes, I would have told you were crazy. Just because, the way that Heaney had been pitching, the way that Skenes mowed down the Dodgers the last time out there, definitely Skenes had a little bit of problems with his command today. But, talking with you before we hopped on here is that, a lot of times Skenes was throwing the pitch I felt like he wanted to, but just was missing a few inches inside, a few inches outside. It wasn't like he was all over the place and the command just kind of wasn't there. And until that fifth inning was able to limit the damage, but then came up against some of the Cubs' harder hitters and made a few mistakes on a little bit of those pitches, left a couple of them a little bit up in the zone, and they were taken out. But I feel like if this would have been a less dominant or less ace-like pitcher, that this game could have gotten a lot more out of control a lot quicker. I know that the ending score was not so great, but deep into the game, the Pirates were still, there 5-3. And honestly, because of last night and their ability to come back, with Reynolds actually hitting during these last two games, kind of felt like they almost still had a chance, but then, the bullpen falters a little bit. And I mean, here we sit on pace. A lot of people are saying for 60, 61 wins. Hopefully, at some point in time, we get some of these guys back from injury. Some of the other stuff starts clicking. We win some Skenes starts. Um, and yeah, I mean, it can only go up from here, I would hope. If it doesn't go up from here, we're gonna have some pretty angry podcasts, some pretty depressing podcasts. But that's not what I want to see from us. So hopefully, get going in the right direction at some point in time here.
I guess if you want to see the silver lining, you can say that we were in all the games, except for maybe one with the Dodgers. With the Cubs, two of the games we hung in there. So these are some of the better offenses in all of baseball. And I mean, that's something that we've said since the offseason, that the pitching is going to be the strength of the Pirates. And even against the top offenses in the sport, where they're able to keep it competitive for most of the game and win some of them too.
Yeah, and for me, kind of the one thing that I don't know kind of sticks out in my mind. I was kind of talking about Brian Reynolds a little bit. Uh, is just how much of a slump that he's been in. You can look back at his stats, and we all know, that he's kind of not the hot starter. I know that a few years ago he hit well for the first week, but then ends up going kind of down into his normal, little bit of a slow start to the season. But I mean, right now, OPS not even, right around like 650. Does have, three home runs at this point in time. I mean, striking out at just a significant clip for him, has 41 strikeouts at this point in time. I think a few weeks ago we were even talking about, when he gets into those little bit of slumps, that he kind of like he hits the ball hard, but it's like right at like the second and the first
Yeah.
baseman doesn't get that elevation. Looking back at his marks kind of like for his career, it definitely is in April and March, and just going and looking at the OPS. Usually for April and March, he's at a 743 OPS for his career. May's actually a little bit worse at the 695. June 992, July 909, and then kind of like teeters off towards the end of the year again. We do know that Brian Reynolds is a solid baseball player, but I mean, I was just kind of hoping that at some point in time, as he got older, that maybe those stats, like, you wouldn't have that like huge peak in the middle of the season, because I mean it's great to see and it's good for that period of time. But for a team that, especially in that first series against Miami, is losing so many close games, I mean, games that were being shut out and not being completely blown out, like 3-0. That I feel like that maybe that could turn the tide a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that's a guy that you count on. I mean, Cruz is hitting well, McCutchen's hitting well. And if you had Brian Reynolds, hopefully maybe getting a hot start to May and not falling into his 695 career OPS for the month of May, that might be able to turn things around a little bit. And we always talk about kind of lengthening that lineup, and you hate to see, I know it's easy to pick on like the Tommy Phams and different stuff like that. And this is not like a Tommy Pham defense type of thing whatsoever. But when you're also not getting that offense from a guy that you expect it from, that also can have, a detrimental effect on the team overall.
Maybe they need to renegotiate his contract or something, because that's when he got really hot, when his contract was getting to the finish line. So I wonder how much extra money that made him, being hot to begin that season. But he seems to have, he gets frustrated, and we get frustrated watching it. But he seems to be pretty steady with his approach and trust the process and not shake things up too much, apart from, when he changed his walk up song and had quite a bit of success when he went to Beer for My Horses. But all that stuff is the superstitious thing that all of us baseball players have done. Um, but yeah, I trust the process. I trust Brian Reynolds. You know, now that we get into May, you would hope that as he turns the page, which, like you said, May isn't a guarantee that things are going to get better. Um, but things warm up and they get into the summer, he performs well. Um, you just know what you're going to get out of him by the end of the season, but when you watch it in real time, it can get pretty frustrating, especially like you said with how hot that O'Neal Cruz has been. And I think last week we talked about the back end 8-9, setting the table for Cruz after the first time through, and then Cruz has done his job to produce. And while they haven't been all home runs, when he's hit these doubles, he's sitting out there waiting to be driven in. It would be nice to have a productive Reynolds, that hot Reynolds to drive in Cruz from second and really snowball these innings because that feels like what these offenses have done to the Pirates is, Pirates give an inch, they take a mile, and they really pile on like today, we are talking about Skenes, and yeah, it was Dansby Swanson who's having a resurgent season. At this pace, he's got to be a contender for comeback player of the year. And Tucker, who's going to get mega paid this offseason. And then Seiya Suzuki, who has been a star. These are the three guys that hit the home runs in one inning. But to Skeens' credit, earlier in the game, he had the bases loaded. He was able to induce a double play, get out of it. We're seeing Skeens be more of a pitcher and less of a flamethrower, and he's trying to take that next step. And we're just seeing some growing pains every once in a while. He's not a video game character. He's not, you know, the second coming. He's a human who's just a very very good baseball player, very good pitcher, and is very determined and very competitive. And he has an attitude, a pit bull attitude that we haven't seen here maybe since AJ Burnett.
Yeah, and it's not like we don't see players go through, little slumps, even in with pitchers, or just little bumps in the road. And the way that he burst onto the scene and the season that he had last year, I mean, it's not like he's number one facing these teams a lot of time. It's not like, especially a guy who didn't have much of a minor league career and then bumps up to the majors. There's not a ton of tape on him. And yes, he does have a pitch mix and is adding to that. And at times, if everything is working perfectly, like it was in the Dodgers series, then you see a dominant game like that. And then sometimes, I mean, if Keller went out there and threw 5 innings and gave up 3 runs, I feel like that most of us would kind of be like, not the greatest start, but at least kept us in there and gave us a chance to win and didn't let the team kind of break it open. But with Skeens, it's like, okay, anytime he gives up any run, like I said, I go back to the game where I was at where he, gave up his second run of the game and gave up a home run, and the fans are kind of like chanting sell the team and stuff. Well, they're expecting like perfection from him. And I mean, in the end, I believe his numbers are going to play out pretty well for this season. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have games like this, and it wasn't like he left the game in a situation where the Pirates didn't have a chance to win. So, I mean, some of the overreaction I've seen out there on social media, and I know a lot of that is just kind of like the hot take and the riling up conversation, because I mean, that's what a lot of the stuff in Pittsburgh is about. I haven't listened to a ton of media other than national media, when it's coming to talking about other sports franchises. Maybe I should just kind of tune into like a Kansas City radio station or a Baltimore radio station, or, something like that, and just see the types of conversations they're having about when their team's doing well or when their team's doing poor, just to kind of get that out there. But I did see some stuff today about, Pittsburgh media, or Pittsburgh at least hosts of like, their radio programs kind of like riling up some people about conversations about what's wrong with Skenes. Well, I don't think anything's wrong with him. He was missing some of his spots. He was frustrated with himself that you could see. And I mean, if we know Paul Skenes and what he's shown so far this season and last season, that I mean, I would hate to be the team that comes out and faces him next time because I believe he would probably be a man on a mission that wouldn't want to see something like this happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't tune in, like you said, to the other markets, but I do listen to MLB Network Radio. And sometimes you get, when the Cardinals were hot and they were in their long stretch, they had some regulars that would call in and they were constantly complaining about even the best teams, the Yankees, you get Dodgers fans that call in and complain. So I don't think it's obviously not unique to the Pirates. It's just we've been beaten down time and time again. And I think even though I don't live in the Pittsburgh media market to get a lot of those talk radio stations, I mean, my understanding is that that's how they get their listens. Because if they were talking positively about the team, then I'm sure that they wouldn't get the engagement, they wouldn't get the listeners. They have to go with the public sentiment. And to the point about if Mitch Keller had done this, I think that we have high expectations for Skeens, and we think that he's going to give up one or two runs at most. And so when it does get into that 3-4 territory, then that's where we start to worry. But at the same time, the lack of offense makes that even worse because no matter who we're facing, let alone a team that's leading our division, if the Pirates give up 2 runs, go down by 2 runs, you're thinking, it's over. Yeah, I'll just go find something else to watch because we have that little faith in the offense, especially, you know, below maybe the cleanup spot to generate anything. And I cringe right now when Tommy Pham comes up with runners on base, because it ends up being the Austin Hedges thing all over again. It's like, okay, but he has it in him. He had a good season last year. The defense that he's playing out in left field is strong. So there's some value there. uh, But do you hold on to him like you did Rowdy Telez last year, thinking, okay, it's just around the corner. It's coming. Any day now, he's gonna have that at bat. But the longer you wait and the longer that you hang those hopes on Tommy Pham, I mean, you're taking at bats away from guys that you really want to see what you have, like a Gorski or a Canario, where there's decisions that need to be made with those guys. Um, Canario more than Gorski, but yeah, do you really want to keep running him out there when you have other options?
Are you looking for coverage of all four major sports leagues? NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL. Look no further than Sportsvival. At Sportsvival, they are dedicated to providing quality sports analysis, up to date news, and original content with a focus on draft and prospects, analyzing how teams are built and how franchises evolve through their strategic decisions. Without sports, how would we survive? Sportsvival, proud partners of Bucks in the Basement. That's like the more frustrating part here because just got done earlier today, I should say earlier as in like a couple hours ago, watching a Bubba Chandler start where he goes 5 innings, strikes out 9. And yeah, I'm excited for Bubba. And people are saying like, why is he down there? Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, get him up here. I would put him into, Majinski's part in the rotation, next time through. Like I wouldn't even really think about that. But then I'm trying to think like, okay, so where is this rejuvenated offense going to come from? Is this going to
Right.
be another like, you know, where he goes 5 innings and strikes out 9 and gives up 1 run, and the Pirates end up losing, you know, 2-1 or 3-2 or something or whatever it may be? That's where the frustrating part is we need offense.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't rely entirely. It's not like football where your defense can put up points too. The pitchers, no matter how good Paul Skeens is, he can't score runs when he's on the mound. So you need to have the offense show up and play some fundamental baseball. I know that that's something that Shelton has said from the beginning. You're going to win games in the margins, but you don't see the fundamental baseball as much as they've talked about it. Guys can't get bunts down. They're not stealing like they were earlier in the year as a team. Generally, you have a couple of guys that really are succeeding in that, but you're not seeing everybody taking advantage of it like you did. You're not seeing that extra aggressiveness. You're not seeing taking it. That's something that we always talk about the 13 through 15 teams, but you have a special player like a Pedro Alvarez. For as big as he was a very intuitive, very smart, very skilled base runner, and that's something that this team is missing. We talked about that with G1 Bay. As fast as he is, he just doesn't have a feel for it all the time. So taking that one extra base, O'Neill Cruz had that double today that went to the wall, and I'm not one of the O'Neill Cruz's lazy guys. I certainly am not. But he didn't hustle it out of the box. Is that one when it's a tight game against a division opponent? Instead of having your extended follow through and kind of watching it, hustle out of it. If he's at third, he's scoring on the sac fly to center field instead of going halfway from second. The little things like that, and it ends up not mattering because they got blown out by so much in the end. But at the time, when it was still a close game, those are the little things, the fundamentals, getting a bunt down, even like your IKF or your Adam Frazier. Like those guys aren't getting bunts down with regularity. Those are the little things that make a big difference game to game.
Yeah, and that's like the big thing for me right now is like you can't string together enough stuff positively to make me think that this offense is going to all of a sudden break kind of out of this funk. And you talk about like a Tommy Pham there in his defense, and yeah, and that's the frustrating part. And I know that I never say like the year six or the this part, but like I mean, it's being said out there. I mean, Charrington has to be feeling some sort of pressure. Shelton has to be feeling some sort of pressure. And I mean, at some point in time, it's like, okay, this really it isn't working. You get guys on base, and Tommy Pham's like hitting into a double play. Adam Frazier hitting into a double play, playing some good defense, both of them. But I mean, in the end, like the one guy who's hitting the ball like is Emmanuel Valdez. Like I would have him at second base in front of like instead of Frazier every single time. I know that there is that thing with like Horowitz not being there and having him play first base, but to me, I would be like, okay, it's more important to get Jared Triolo's bat going because if that doesn't get going, a player that you have more control over that's going to be here longer and not holding on to, like you said, these 1 year guys, like giving Rowdy Tellez a way to like break out of his funk instead of just basically saying, okay, we gave you a month, we gave you 100 at bats, this didn't work, it's time to move on. We're bringing in some of the younger guys, and we're going to see if that works better.
Yeah. At what point is that seen as waving the white flag, though? I mean, moving on from Rowdy would have been a lot easier than moving on from Fam, especially with the financial situation the team says that it's in. Uh, you know, eating 5 million is a far cry from eating what Rowdy was making. And then, yeah, do you say this is the punt now? But Tommy Pham, it's not like he's setting the world on fire, but symbolically, it could be seen as a punt if you're getting rid of a free agent that you had hopes for, and you decide, well, we're going to run with the young guys. There's some inherent thought there that doing that means that we have decided that whether or not they produce how we would like them to, we're just going to give them a shot, give them a look.
Yeah, and that's where it's like kind of like it's that fine line, it's that middle ground. It's like, okay, we're, sitting here, like I said, on pace for 60, 61 wins, and you start putting in the young guys that, Canario has shown some pop, but has also shown that swing and miss. The same with Gorski. And if you let them run out there for a bunch of games and they don't produce, what is that showing? You have, Billy Cook off to a slow start in Indianapolis. And I mean, I look back at his stats and he's kind of like Reynolds. I mean, I looked back last year and his OPS in the first month or so was under 600, and then he started to jump up. I looked at the year before, and it's kind of that same thing again. I mean, if he was hitting down there, it'd be like, okay, well, there's your answer.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just like once again, like trying to figure something out, and that's where I think that Pirates fans' frustrations come from. That's where we're Pirates fans. That's where our frustrations come from. Is that I mean, we lived through the last rebuild, and it was successful, and they had like the Neil Walkers. We talked about this before, the Starling Marte. You mentioned Pedro Alvarez, and it seemed like that there were McCutcheon, even Polanco. I mean, he did have some good. There was other stuff that was kind of coming, and right now it's like Horowitz, who he traded for, is still down, and Altoona rehabbing, and hopefully that comes back. And Nikki G, unfortunately, broke. So now we're not seeing like so it's like, okay, let's give Gorski a shot. I mean, let's give Canario a shot. Let's do this. And that to me is like, that's where, like, definitely it gets frustrating. But we were talking about the social media stuff, and I know it's going to sound like we're kind of going like in like a little bit of a circle here, but I was going to bring that up previously, but Scott, you got on a nice little roll there, just kind of talking through a lot of that stuff. But I mean, I was looking on social media, and this is something that was written by a media member, and it goes like this: my confidence in the organization has hit an all-time low. We've been through some bad times and some short-lived good times. With a core like this underperforming, it's rock bottom. The GM failed, and so has the manager. It sucks all around. Who do you think that is about? The Pirates, right? You would think that's about the Pirates, correct?
You would think. It sounds a lot like the Pirates.
The Baltimore Orioles. That was just written yesterday about the Baltimore Orioles. Mike Elias has failed, and their manager, Brandon Hyde, has to go. I mean, and that it all sucks. And I said to you before this show, Mike Elias was the executive of the year in 2023, and everything was great in Baltimore, and everything was moving in the right direction. And yes, they did have a little bit more success, but we've seen this time and time again, the White Sox and how quickly they fell during their rebuild. Right now, the Detroit Tigers are in the middle of an actual retool from their failed rebuild. So are the Royals. So, I mean, they're showing some success and they're doing well throughout that. But man, this whole thing is tough. And when you have Henry Davis, who doesn't, hit the ground running, when you have Nick Gonzalez, who takes, a year or longer to get it going and wondering if he's even going to get it going, Endy getting out for a year, O'Neill Cruz, breaking his ankle, different stuff like that. There's little things in there that could be those, like, I think, built-in excuses and stuff that we've kind of talked about before. I mean, but in the end, like, people were still bringing up Jazz Chisholm and how we should have traded for him last year and different stuff. And we had enough stuff to get it done. If anybody hasn't watched the Miami Marlins recently, and I'm pretty sure that most people probably haven't, go check out the catcher that the Marlins traded for to get to, in the Jazz Chisholm trade. That's who they were targeting. And the Pirates didn't have that to get that done. And I think I said at the time, that's still on Bench Harrington, that we didn't have the pieces to get it done. But man, it would be nice to have like a guy like that for like, and that organization that comes up and just hits the ground running, or maybe stumbles for like a week or so, but then all of a sudden hits the Jets and starts hitting. And we had that with Brian Reynolds in 2019. But I mean, right now it's like we're still trying to figure all this stuff out, or I should say they're trying to figure this stuff out, and we're left wondering like, is this ever going to get any better?
Yeah, forgive me if I don't shed a tear for the Baltimore Orioles because I feel like they're in a good spot, and I think that sooner than later, the sentiment with the fans will turn around because they are in a better spot because they had all this talent that have shown glimpses more than what the Pirates prospects have really shown, and they were able to all come together around the same time, and they have those extra pieces that they'll be able to deal to fix their pitching problem that they're having. And development is not linear, and we've said that with the Pirates prospects. And so I'm sure that your Jackson Holidays and all those guys that in Baltimore will come around. But yeah, it's you see the promise more with them than you see with the Pirates, and maybe it's one of those things like we've talked about that we're too close to the organization that we're watching them every day and we're hyper analyzing everything where we talked about this with Jack Sawinski that we were picking him apart, but we said at the same time if he was playing for the Rays and having the same kind of year that he was having, then we would still be like when he got hot, be like, oh well, why can't we find a guy like that? Well, we'd kill to have a Jack Sawinski. And that's just kind of the way it goes when you're not watching the team every day. And that sentiment that you're talking about can apply to so many different teams. The Pirates don't have the resources and they don't spend the way that we want them to. And so it's almost easier when they fail because, it's like, well, they failed, but they weren't really trying, where they're trying as best they can within their situation. Where you're the Orioles, where you went through all that losing, and then this new ownership comes in and they put money into it, and then you still are failing. Like the Rangers, yeah, they won the World Series, but they put a bunch of money into it, and then they had a terrible season that next year, a lot of injuries and stuff. But the White Sox, as you bring up, it's got to be more heartbreaking when they try and spend money and it still fails than where we're at, and it's just like, well, we're just the Pirates. We don't have the resources, so we can't try like the other teams do.
Yeah, and I guess, like I said, I think it's just like this downtrodden thing that I'm feeling right now, just because. I mean, at some point in time, you think it's going to be that year. Like I said, we've lived through it where it's been successful previously. But yeah, I just don't know like where the offense is going to come from, and I still also like in the glass, half full part of my brain, the fan hat side of my brain, where I try not to be too analytical, is. And we've had the conversation about Detroit last year when they were kind of downtrodden and basically got hot after like the trade deadline and were able to go on this unbelievable streak. And obviously they're having another pretty good start to their season here, so it wasn't just like this flash in the pan and this fluke. But I start to think, I'm like, okay, that's the reinforcements. Once Horowitz is back and hopefully he's as healthy as he can be, that's a bat in the lineup. If you have Nick Gonzalez, that's a bat in the lineup. If Emmanuel Valdez continues to at least have some pop, then that's like a bench piece, and different things like that. Billy Cook, who we had so much hope in last year when we traded for him, and he was having a good season after starting out slow, then maybe that's when he gets hot. So I mean but here's the thing is it's the same thing that happened at the beginning of the season. It's like if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, and it's not like we have any of these guarantees. And going back to like Brian Reynolds, kind of struggling to start the season, it's like, God, we don't even have like our good players playing well at this point in time.
And we don't have a Chicago White Sox in our division.